I know you just wrote a piece for The Atlantic. I just finished reading it, all about Kash Patel. And I'm saying his name correctly, right, David? Kash Patel?
Yes, you are.
Anyway, I mentioned to all my followers that Kash Patel has been named, or I guess President-elect Trump says he wants him to be the new director of the FBI, which means he would have to fire Christopher Wray, who has been the director of the FBI, because normally FBI directors have 10-year terms, right?
Well, that's the point you really need to stress to people who don't follow these things and watch them closely. What you just said is so, so important. Because there's going to be a lot of discussion about Kash Patel and what he's like. But before we even get to that alarming subject, we have to get to this shocking thing, and we're now so used to it, that President-elect Trump is talking about firing the current director of the FBI. And again, this will seem strange. You're used to when a new president comes in, there's a new CIA director. That's normal. There's a new cabinet. That's normal. The president-elect or the incoming president makes lots of new appointments. But for 50 years, it has just been unheard of for a new president to do that with the FBI. And there's a backstory and a history, and we can go through chapter and verse. But with Trump, even if Trump were picking the best person in the world instead of maybe the worst person in the world, which is what he's doing, this would still be shocking.
Well, what about when he got rid of James Comey?
All right, so can I take people down a little
Yes,
history here?
please do. And by the way, if you guys have questions for David, just put them in the question section and I'll try to get them to get to them. Go ahead, tell us.
So I have to go a little back in time just so people understand how astonishing where we are is. So the Federal Bureau of Investigation was founded at the beginning of the 20th century. For a long time, it was headed by a man named J. Edgar Hoover, who abused power in all kinds of really heinous ways. And Hoover would do deals with presidents where he would say, I will do favor, you keep me in this job forever. And I will do favors for you of a kind that are pretty improper when you need it. And presidents he didn't work for the president because presidents were often afraid of him, but he would do business with them. And this led to one scandal after another, and it all sort of exploded in the early 1970s. And after that experience, a new protocol was established, which is the FBI director would be a career person, non-political, and appointed for 10 years.
And who made that decision, David? Was that Congress?
It was originally a practice forced on Richard Nixon by his own scandals. So when Nixon forced Hoover out of office, then replaced him with a very compliant man named Patrick Gray, there was a huge scandal over Nixon's Patrick Gray appointment. And then to sort of quiet the scandal, Nixon said, okay. And yeah, Congress passed a new 10-year term, and Nixon appointed somebody who was above reproach. And Nixon's appointee stayed there through the rest of Nixon's term. He resigned in 1974, through President Ford, who followed Nixon, and then Jimmy Carter kept the man on the job. And in fact, the man wanted to leave. He was older, and he'd been on the job for a while. He wanted to retire in Carter's first year. And Carter implored him, no, if you leave in the first year, it's going to look like I fired you and like it's political. Stay, give me one more year, and then you can go.
Can you talk about why the FBI job itself, David, is designed to be so apolitical? Obviously, they have these scandals and they reformed it, but we know historically why. But are there other reasons why this, Attorney General is sometimes filled with somebody who is a political
Yeah,
ally, right?
yeah.
But the FBI director, since these changes were made, that is not acceptable.
So the Attorney General makes policy, but the Attorney General doesn't run a police force. Look, most crimes in the United States are prosecuted by local and state police, and they are of varying qualities. But federal crimes are so serious, and federal law enforcement power is so awesome that the United States does not want to be one of those countries where the head of state says, prosecute this person and don't prosecute that person. This person is my enemy. If they've done anything wrong, throw the book at them. This person is my friend. Whatever they've done wrong, protect them. And remember also, simply being investigated is an ordeal, even if no charges are ever brought. The decision to start an investigation, as Hillary Clinton can tell you, even if you're completely vindicated, is a life-altering, terrible experience.
Right.
So the power to initiate even an investigation has to be just beyond reproach. It has to be seen by everyone can know. You can say whatever you want about the president, and maybe you'll lose friends. Maybe you'll lose a job. If you're running for an office. But the one thing that will not happen to you in America if you criticize the president is that you will be investigated for a crime. That's the American way. And so it continued. The person Jimmy Carter picked for FBI director stayed there through 7 years of Ronald Reagan's term. The person Ronald Reagan appointed stayed there through Bill Clinton's term. And here's another one of the stories of how unusual Donald Trump was. So Reagan's appointee, picked in 1987, served through Reagan last year, George H.W. Bush, and into Clinton. On the way out the door, the George H.W. Bush people commissioned a report that said, this person did, now by Trump's standards, these are not big scandals, but he used a government airplane to visit his daughter more than one time. And in those,
what FBI director was this again?
This was William Sessions.
Okay. Oh,
William
right.
Sessions.
Right.
So he used a government plane to visit his daughter. And it's like not maybe the worst crime in the world, but it was considered unacceptable. And so on their way out the door, the Bush people did a report by Bill Barr, who was Attorney General under the elder Bush, that said, this is very concerning. And they left the report to the Clinton people. And the Clinton people said, what are we supposed to do with this? We're supposed to fire this guy? It'll look political. And so they sat on the report for 6 months, during which time Bill Clinton had meeting after meeting with Sessions that said, if you retire voluntarily, there are ambassadorships, there are all kinds of, don't make me fire you, because that will be terrible. And Sessions wouldn't go, and Clinton fired him. And then Clinton's person, Louis Freeh, stayed there for the first year of H.W. Bush, and so on. So when Donald Trump wanted to fire James Comey, that was not like Clinton saying, I have to, the Bush people left me no choice but to fire Sessions, and I want to avoid doing it. Trump said, I want to fire Comey. Even Trump in his first term understood this is not how it's done. So he got the Deputy Attorney General to fabricate a letter that said, the reason I'm firing Comey is because of how mean he was to Hillary Clinton, which was a total lie, obviously. But the need to lie showed that Trump understood, I can't just say, I want my own person at the FBI. Because
but that's what he's doing now.
That's what he's doing now. So what happened in 2017 was this thing blew up, and the only way Trump could quiet the uproar was by saying, okay, I'll pick someone I will fire Comey, but I'll replace him with Chris Wray, the person who's had the job now. The person Trump picked in 2017 served 3 years of Trump, all of Biden, and he's on the job now. This is Trump's own pick.
And he has 3 years left in his term.
3 years left in his term. And Trump is saying, before we even get to Kash Patel, I want to fire this person so I can have my own person in the job. So people need to understand the firing or the threatened firing is already an enormous scandal, or any other president, Clinton and the others would have regarded it as embarrassing and scandalous to do it. And it's just taken for granted because the next thing he wants to do is so horrible that the last thing he wants to do looks almost innocent.
Well, in fact, you say, and then I think you said something in your piece, like naming Kash Patel is like taking an already terrible thing and putting frosting and sprinkles on top of it.
Exactly.
So let's talk about Kash Patel, David. He is a MAGA loyalist to his core.
Right. So FBI directors have always been, since the J. Edgar Hoover days, people of broad and widely accepted reputation for political neutrality. People who sometimes didn't even vote, and always did things presidents didn't like, and that was the job. Many presidents and many FBI directors refused even to meet one another. I worked in a White House, and if you had anything you wanted to know from the FBI, including the president is going to decorate an FBI officer, and we need to know the names of the officer's children and make sure they're pronounced and spelled correctly so we can recognize them in the speech. If I wanted to say, what are the names of this hero's children? I went to the White House counsel's office and said, would you make the call to the FBI to ask them the name of the hero's children because I can't talk to them. I would be fired or worse if I placed a direct call to the FBI. There was no.
So any signal of impropriety or any kind of pressure from the executive office to the FBI was absolutely verboten.
Verboten. And that's how it's always been. And now you're going to point this person who is one of these Watergate characters who will do anything for Donald Trump, commit. And, when he was serving in the last year of the Trump administration as chief of staff in the Defense Department, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, jail is an uncomfortable place. So if you're thinking about doing something that will get you sent to jail, don't do it. they had to caution people: do not break the law for Trump when he was working as a staffer in DOD. Now he's offered for the head of the FBI.
Before we talk more about Kash Patel, I want to ask you about what Republican Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa said about Wray. He said he had failed at fundamental duties of being the FBI director and argued it was time to, quote, chart a new course of transparency and accountability. And then he added, Kash Patel must prove to Congress he will reform and restore public trust in the FBI. So Christopher Wray, I guess, is not without his critics, right?
I don't think any FBI director in history has been without critics. And look, they make a lot of tough calls, and some of them may be wrong. But what the Republicans are mad at with Chris Wray are the things he did that were good. That Chris Wray, unlike James Comey, was handled the problem of what do you do about Hillary Clinton's email questions. And he put his fingerprints all over it, and he got involved, and he made a lot of statements, both one way and the other way, things that he started basically improvising and got himself into a lot of trouble. Wray, when he had to deal with Biden prosecutions, said that we're playing this inside the book. That thing on the shelf, the book, open the book, a metaphorical book, and he had no personal involvement. He kept away from it. So for Republicans who think that Hunter Biden is the biggest law enforcement problem since Al Capone, this was unsatisfying because when you left it to the line professionals, they said, there's not as much here as the Trump people want. Yeah, he didn't. There's some income tax things. That's real. That's true. But the idea that he's at the center of some international crime ring, that's not true. He's a sad person with addiction problems who didn't pay taxes. Okay, he should pay his taxes.
So that's where that criticism comes from. Well, talk to us about Kash Patel now. He has been a Trump loyalist. He was involved in the first Trump administration. Just quickly run through his CV if you
Well,
could.
he was a public defender. He got involved with Donald Trump. Like a lot of people in the Trump orbit, he's a bitter person who feels he never got the recognition he deserved. Other people might feel he got more recognition than he deserved. And he's always made it clear he would do anything for Trump. In the first Trump term, he was the person. There are a lot of complicated secret things about Trump's relationship with Russia. And he was the person who was improperly sharing secret knowledge from the House and Senate Intelligence Committees with Republican partisans in a way you're not supposed to do because he thought it would help Trump. He will do anything. And what this means is if he goes inside the building, it's not just a matter of will he start prosecutions he shouldn't start. It's not just a matter of will he stop prosecutions to protect Trump friends. The question is he's going to go through every agent who ever did anything that Trump didn't like and punish that agent. And the agents who did things that Trump did like, they'll be promoted. He's going to he's going to have access to every secret. One of the big rules of the FBI is if you don't charge, you often find out very embarrassing things about people when you're investigating them. They've had some scandal or sad thing in their past. It's not illegal, but it's embarrassing. And if you make the decision not to charge, all of those things that are found are secret forever. Because you don't punish a person who hasn't committed a crime by embarrassing them in public. But Kash Patel can do that.
Well, also, it sounds like that he wants to be seeking retribution for a lot of things that Trump didn't like and or doesn't like in the future. For example, we've heard a lot about the media, that he's going to go after the media. In fact, in a podcast with Steve Bannon, let me quote this. He said in 2023, yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly. We'll figure that out. He is, by the way, an election denier. He believes the 2020 election was rigged, or at least he says so in public. And he says he's going to go after members of the media. I guess when Trump doesn't like things they write, how can he do that?
And what he can do, the election denial is very important because, look, Trump did a lot of bad things as president, and he did a lot of bad things as a businessman. So Trump feels anytime when people say sue him because he ran a fraudulent multi-level marketing scheme and made millions of dollars by deceiving people, and then there was a civil lawsuit that said you have to pay them back plus penalties for lying. Trump thinks I'm being persecuted. I want to know every law enforcement person who was involved in holding me to account for my fraud, which was, found by a court, and where he has a sentence to pay, he has a fine to pay. With these elections things, perfectly ordinary good citizens who volunteer their time to oversee the election of 2020, as they had maybe done in 2018, as they may be done in 2016. These are often older people, and these are people who are active in their communities. They serve on school boards. They're good citizens, and their job is to run the mechanics of the election, which depend on an enormous amount of volunteer labor. When Trump lost, his supporters decided these people were the biggest enemies in the world, and they unleashed furies upon them. Now, two of the women have won a big judgment against.
Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah,
But
because he waged relentless defamatory campaigns against people who had no resources, who were not public figures, who had just volunteered to serve their community. And I think a lot of people like that, and the law officers who protected them and supported them and helped them get some kind of measure of justice against Rudy Giuliani for defaming them, those are the people who are going to be in the crosshairs from Kash Patel.
I mean, but plus members of the media, no?
Um, I I think they may try that. I think that there are a lot of, my own fear as a member is that Trump's media approach is going to be a little bit more indirect. And we saw that what he did to the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos. Media companies tend to be owned by people or corporations that have very widely distributed interests. So if you want to punish the owner of the Washington Post, you don't attack the Washington Post. You squeeze another business that owner has and make it clear this pressure will continue until the Washington Post changes its ways. So Jeff Bezos, who is the major holder of Amazon, in the first Trump term, Amazon lost a $10 billion Pentagon contract to punish Bezos for the reporting of the Washington Post. And I think that will be true for, well, we've seen that Comcast is spinning off its NBC holding, partly for economic reasons, but partly because they think, who needs this? Comcast has many, many interests. The government, they're regulated by the government. Not owning a news company is a way to escape a lot of threats. So I don't think you have to arrest an NBC journalist if you can put so much pressure on the parent company that NBC is spun off in a way that becomes economically unviable.
Right. Or they squeeze the corporations, then they have to fire a lot of the people in the news division, right? Because they don't get that Pentagon contract, for example. Well, let me ask you about some of the things that people have said about Patel, and then I know you've got a split, but William Barr. Now, Trump wanted to install Patel as the number two guy at the FBI during his first term. As you, I think, note in your piece, Barr said to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows that Patel would get the deputy job, quote, over my dead body. Patel, Barr wrote, had virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest levels of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency. The very idea of moving Patel into a role like this showed a shocking detachment from reality. This is something, David, we're seeing in a lot of these appointments, that the people have never, either run something as big as, for example, the Pentagon, or they have no experience in the area that they've been, in the area of the agency they've been charged to lead. Is that the same case? Is this the same case as with Kash Patel?
Much worse, because I'm not saying that any particular person is an idiot here, but you put an idiot in as Secretary of Defense, the Pentagon is very happy to run itself. And the Pentagon has a long history of ignoring what civilians want it to do and running on its own horsepower. And I think they will just, that Trump's appointee as Secretary of Defense will find it very difficult even to find out what's going on inside the military, much less interfere. But the FBI is a much smaller organization than the military. It's got many, many responsibilities, and the director has to be involved. The director, by the way, is the front line of defense against terrorist attack. The FBI is our premier anti-terrorism, domestic terrorism defense organization. You put some unworthy person into that job, we're all less safe. The FBI is in charge of protecting us from espionage inside the country by hostile foreign powers like China. You put an unworthy person, we're all less secure in our information. He's not just a cop in chief. He's also the front line of defense against so many domestic
He
threats.
also has said on day one he wants to get rid of the Washington headquarters of the FBI, right? And kind of go through the agents and pick out the ones. I mean, it sounds like that a lot of these agents are going to have to undergo loyalty tests or things like that.
Well, the thing about the headquarters is pretty ironic. So the FBI is housed in a horrifically ugly cement 1970s building in the center of Washington. It's completely obsolete. And the FBI has for a long time wanted to get rid of it and move to a campus like the CIA has outside Washington, which is
Right,
safer.
in Langley,
Yeah.
Virginia.
So I think they have a Maryland location in mind. And this was a project in, I think, the Obama years to move the FBI out of the downtown. And Trump stopped it because the way the FBI was going to pay for this move, in part, was by selling their old building to a developer who would knock it down and probably build a giant hotel complex that would compete with the Trump Hotel. And because Trump didn't want competition, he said absolutely not. And he got Congress to rescind the money that the FBI had to move out to Bethesda because it would have meant knocking down their building and selling it to a developer to build a hotel. So the idea that Kash Patel, he's going to discover, no, Trump wants that building. Well, Trump sold the hotel, so maybe he doesn't care anymore. But
That's
that's
kind
the
of
kind of,
gross. So, I mean, I'm from Arlington, and that's sort of even the building. If the building's ugly, that's sort of the heart of the government. To have a hotel there is pretty gross, in my opinion.
they they do that all. A lot of those central Washington buildings are kind of obsolete, and um, and government employees want parking, cheap parking too.
Yeah, yeah,
and 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 it's how I have look. I have no opinion on where the FBI should be
yeah.
located. The FBI wanted to be in Maryland. Congress had agreed. The Obama administration had agreed. They had a piece of land, and it was stopped not for any reason you name, but so that the land would not become available to a Trump competitor.
So for him to say he wants to get rid of the Washington headquarters is not that scandalous.
No, but it suggests the flippancy and foolishness with which he's approaching this important job. But he does talk about how he's going to treat the agents. I mean, FBI agents, these are highly skilled people. Like a lot of, they, there's this, the federal government is it's a big organization, but the civilian part, I think the federal government has no more civilian employees today than it did in the 1960s. Because the federal government is a huge consumer of information technology. I mean, when you think about it, it's obvious. Think about what it took to process a social security check in 1967 before the computer, and how many people had to be involved in filing and so that is now all done by machines. So the Social Security Administration can pass many more checks with many fewer people. And so it is for the organization that runs Medicare. The federal government doesn't do that much stuff. It pays for a lot of stuff, and the stuff it does is military and FBI. And the people who do that work are very valuable people who are probably making much less than they could make in the private sector, but they believe in the work. And you start harassing them, you're going to lose a generation of talent.
Someone said, wasn't this the first FBI that raided a former president's home? Someone is asking that.
That's a way to put it. It's the first former president to steal government documents and commit so many crimes. I mean, the Trump people have this idea that if Donald Trump is subject to the same laws as anybody else, that is somehow some unique injury to him. But look, I was a government employee, and it was very clear to me when I left the job, I was to walk out. I could take the photographs I brought into the office with me. If I had any personal property of my own, I could take it out. But and no one was going. There wasn't like a monitor check, but I could take. I mean, everything I took out of the office could fit into like a grocery bag, because every piece of paper in the office was federal property, and I was not allowed to take any of it out. And that's the rule that everyone understands, including presidents. There's one of Clinton's most senior people was disbarred and served a suspended sentence for trying to steal a document, trying to take a document that he had personally created.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of these questions are asking, did somebody who I know follows me asked, did the Democrats weaponize the FBI? That is the claim by Republicans, correct?
Yes, but they have the problem. When you have the first a president who, as a businessman, committed a long career of civil frauds, bank fraud on customers, and then as president tried to overthrow the government. That's going to generate a lot law enforcement activity. And it's different from what happened with Ronald Reagan or Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton or George H.W. Bush, because they didn't do those things. And that's the suppressed predicate that Trump created. Like one of the questions that the Supreme Court had to decide was, does a president have criminal immunity or not? Now, the United States Constitution was ratified in 1786, so it's been a while. And no Supreme Court had ever ruled very much on this question because it had never come, because presidents didn't commit crimes. You didn't have to ask what was the president's exposure if he committed a crime, because we never found out because there was no case, because the presidents didn't do it. When you have the first president who tries to overthrow the government, it raises questions you didn't have to ask before. So yeah, the FBI has done unprecedented things with regard to Donald Trump. That's not because they're mean or hate Trump. It's because Trump, as president and post-president and pre-president, did unprecedented things for anyone to hold this mighty office.
But I think the response on the other side is, oh, it's been weaponized, when you say there's a very valid reason for that. Before we go, I just have to ask you, David, that someone asked about checks and balances and about all these appointments, and we could go over many of them chapter and verse, but I guess the question is this position still requires Senate confirmation? So is this Kash Patel going to be rubber stamped by the Republican Senate, or do you think there are going to be people who say, wait a second, this guy is too political, he is not independent enough, he doesn't have any experience really in true law enforcement work, we cannot we cannot vote yes on his confirmation?
If I had to guess, I would say it's going to be like what happened with Matt Gaetz. The nomination will fall apart before there's a vote, and Trump will replace it with a less ridiculous choice. But he will have made his point, because, as I said at the beginning, the real scandal here is not the appointment of Kash Patel. That's just the icing. The scandal is the firing of Wray. If Trump is establishing a new principle, which is the FBI director answers to the president. No president since Nixon established the president. The FBI director does not answer. The FBI works for the country, works for the citizens, and presidents have very hands-off relationships with the FBI. If Wray resigns, or if Trump succeeds in firing him and gets away with it, even if he ends up appointing a somewhat less absurd nominee, we're going to be in a world of trouble, because the FBI will already be different. That may be the best available option, but it's already, as so often with these cases, we're already in dangerous territory.
Well, as I mentioned, this is not the first controversial nominee, right? There have been many who just don't seem necessarily cut out for the jobs that they've been given. By the way, John Bolton, who served as National Security Advisor in Trump's first administration, he was Patel's boss. He compared the nomination to Joseph Stalin's secret police chief, which is basically what you have been saying.
Yeah. Well, we've had a variety. There have been, I think you can group the Trump appointments into three main categories. They're the people who, maybe you like them, maybe you don't, but their resume sort of makes sense.
Like Marco Rubio, for example.
Yeah, and maybe you have a high opinion of him, maybe you have a low opinion, but it's not crazy that a senior senator who serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee would become Secretary of State. Maybe he'll be a weak one, but he won't be an outlandish one. Then you have the people who, where there's a serious personality problem of some kind or another, but where their ability to do harm is maybe limited, like Pete Hegseth. I mean, he's a crackpot. He's an ideological crank. His record with women is horrifying. His own mother thought so. But my guess is that Pete Hegseth just doesn't have the mental horsepower and the knowledge of the building, and the Pentagon is organized in a way, I don't know how much harm he's really going to be able to do. Then you have the Tulsi Gabbards and the Kash Patels, who are going to smaller organizations where the boss is more powerful, and who are not just strange personalities, but are in the grip of really un-American ideas. And they can do a lot of damage.
Well, I mean, I think you could argue that Pete Hegseth, I interviewed Steve Schmidt the other day, and he was talking about the guy has the nuclear codes. I mean, it's to be the, ostensibly in charge of how many people work at the Pentagon. Is it what?
3.4 million.
3.4 million.
Yeah. But look, I'm not defending this nomination at all. It's a terrible, terrible pick. And
You're just saying
it's a
he can't really screw it up because the Pentagon runs itself.
the risk is, by the way, this is not a good thing for the Pentagon to run itself, because if the Pentagon is left to its own devices, they'll say, let's take all the money and give 1/3 to the Army, 1/3 to the Navy, 1/3 to the Air Force. Let's keep buying the weapon systems we've always built, only bigger and more expensive. Um, uh, and they will run themselves. They're a bureaucracy too, so you need civilian control of the Pentagon. So somebody may say, you know what, we've been studying this, we need a little bit more for the Air Force than the treaty you guys are going to work out amongst yourselves. You can't decide how you get your money. But this thing I would be most frightened of with the Secretary of Defense is that the risk that politicization of promotion. And
Well, he
if
also wants women out of, he said he wants women out of combat. He wants trans people out of the military. I mean, I think culturally he really wants to change the tenor of the place.
well, good luck getting women out of the military in the middle of a big crisis.
Out of combat positions.
Well, good luck with this just tells you how dopey these people are. Um, is a drone operator based in Tampa who kills America's deadliest terrorist enemy, is that person in combat or not? I think so.
Yeah.
Why can't a woman do that job?
Well, why can't they fly fighter jets? I mean, we don't have to get into this conversation necessarily, but I mean, women
but
have proven to be excellent in combat.
but
But
he's
wait, David, before,
combat. The point is, he's carrying an idea of combat that is 20 years out of date.
right, with that actual front lines, I hear you. Hey, but you didn't really answer my question about the Senate. So before you go, you said that you thought that the Patel uh whole process was probably going to crash and burn, right? And he'll pick somebody who's less offensive, perhaps. But what about all these other nominees who fall in the category of both weird and could do damage, right? Do you think the Senate is going to roll over? I mean, what do you think is going to happen there, David?
I think anyone, it will be very unusual. If anyone actually gets to a vote, they probably pass. That I think that what will happen is there will be leaks. The way this will be stopped, if it is stopped, is before it ever comes to a vote. So that will be with Tulsi Gabbard. There'll be that somebody. This is a person who went and had meetings with the murderous dictator of Syria and endorsed him, who said all kinds of positive things about Putin, who's been running around the world acting like a security risk. And as a private citizen, of course, that's her right. But she was a member of Congress, and now she's appointed to Director of National Intelligence. It's no longer just her business that she likes all these offensive dictators. So information about that will begin to flow, and senators will ask, as they did with Matt Gaetz, please, Mr. President-elect, do not put us on the spot.
So, but they'll also try to keep from humiliating Donald Trump by actually rejecting his nominee during a very public confirmation hearing.
The Republican Senate rejected 2 Trump candidates for the Federal Reserve in his first term, but they never voted on them. The nominations, just one withdrew himself and the other Trump withdrew.
Before we go, I know you have to go. You're going to kill me. But do you have any thoughts on Jared Kushner's father being named ambassador to France?
It's not just Trump has 2 daughters. Both are married. Both have fathers-in-law, and both fathers-in-law have been given. Because Tiffany's father-in-law has been named Trump's emissary to special envoy to Lebanon. Now, it should be said, Tiffany's father looks like a pretty capable guy, actually, and may not impossibly be a good choice. But I just, you know what? There's been a long, hard glass ceiling over the convict American community, and Charles Kushner is just going to break that glass ceiling on behalf of not just himself, but all convict Americans.
Do you want to just tell people watching who may not be familiar with sort of this guy's pretty shady past?
So the Kushner family were refugees from wartime Europe, and they've had a huge success in real estate in New Jersey. Charles is the second generation, and he inherited the company his parents created and built it up even more. And then he got into a huge feud with other members of his family. And in order to prove a point, he hired a prostitute to entrap his brother-in-law and blackmail the brother-in-law into settling the family dispute. And also, he cheated on his taxes. So,
And he served time in prison.
he was convicted by, he was prosecuted by Chris Christie, who was then the U.S. attorney, and served time. And that's the reason why Jared Kushner and Chris Christie hate each other so much. And at the end of Trump 1, Jared Kushner got a pardon for his father. And now the pardoned, convicted sex blackmailer and tax cheat is going to be, or is on his way to be, ambassador to France.
Keeping it classy, David, huh?
I just wonder what are the French supposed to do with this? Like, now, by the way, it should be said that the host government of an ambassador has the right to say, no, we don't want this person. I think it's unlikely that that would happen in this case, but it is always a theoretical possibility. The host government could say, this person is not an acceptable choice, and we'd like somebody else, please. And that's happened usually for more dramatic crimes than tax fraud and sexual blackmail, but certainly it's going to be uncomfortable for the French to figure out how to deal with this.
All right. Well, to be continued. David, thanks so much for hopping on this interview with such short notice on a Sunday night after Thanksgiving. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your writing
Thank
always.
you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.